This is Sarah Mack, and I'll be showing you how to make a map using Caltopo, how to export it, and how to create a shareable link so that you can work on this map collaboratively with your partners. And this will be mainly oriented toward traveling in the backcountry during the winter. So the first thing that we can do here is search for the nearest town or mark to where you're going. So we're going to go to Estes Park, Colorado. And then if I zoom out, oops, I just happen to know that this is Hidden Valley, and so we are going to zoom into the zone that we are going to be building our map. So the layers over here, I generally like to use the Forest Service layer. Perfect. And then I like to add a couple of base layers. One that I find is helpful is shaded relief. So if I click on shaded relief, I can choose how much of that layer is showing on my map. And I find if I just have some shadow, it gives me a better visual idea of where the ridges are and where the valleys are. I just think it's a little bit more visually easier to kind of look at this map. And then another one that I like to add down here, so I just go to stack base layer, is aerial imagery. You can just choose any one of these two options. So I'm going to choose global imagery. And again, you can decide just how much of that global imagery you'd like to see on this map. And I think that that's just really helpful to give you an idea of where you should put your ski line, or where it's just a little bit easier to ascend, where there's just not as much tree coverage. So you can kind of plan your routes in these little zones that have fewer trees in them. So we'll turn that down a little bit. I generally like to have kind of a mix of these two maps. One way you might do it as well is just turn it all the way up to 100% and just add contours to that map. That can be a great way to do it as well. And then pretty awesome to use for winter travel is this slope angled shading feature. So I'm going to select slope angle shading. And if you see down here, this is our key. So anything that's not shaded right now is below 27 degrees. Anything that's yellow is 27 to 29. And so basically anything 30 or above is terrain that we may be avoiding if we're avoiding avalanche terrain or reducing our exposure to risk. So when we're setting our skin track, ideally we're just avoiding any of this steep terrain altogether, because like the amount of time, like statistical chance of you being involved in an incident is much higher on the uphill, because you're just moving much slower and spending way more time in those steeper sections of the terrain. Keep in mind that slope angle shading only has so high of resolution. As you can see, it's quite pixelated here, and there's a very high chance that the resolution isn't showing you every single tiny feature of the terrain that you're actually in. So let's say, the resolution is like 40 feet and you find a micro feature that is smaller than 40 feet, then that coloring wouldn't show up on the map here. So it's just a tool to give you a generalized idea of what the slope angle shading is of a larger piece of terrain, but it isn't, it definitely has its limitations as far as the resolution goes. So that is why we really have to take, use our eyes in the field and take our clinometers and make sure that we're staying very aware of any terrain that we may be traveling through that is unexpectedly steep. I'll show you one more feature here. So we can go to Add and DEM Shading. And we can use this in combination with the avalanche forecast for our zone. And we see that the persistent slab is on north through east, near and above tree line, and there is a forecasted storm slab, all aspects and elevations. So we can add that shading actually to our map if we want a better visual representation of where we might expect these avalanche problems. So slab avalanches occur between 30 and 45 degrees, but today we're just deciding to avoid any terrain steeper than 30. Check that box. And now the aspect is north through east, right? So we're just going to go to north through east. And you may, depending on the avalanche danger, which today is considerable, we may decide to give ourselves a little bit wider of a margin. So we might just even go to northwest all the way to southeast, just to kind of give ourselves a little bit wider of a margin. The elevation in Rocky Mountain National Park, There's terrain a little bit below the near tree line elevation band that behaves as if it were near tree line. So we're going to go a little bit lower and put in 10,500 feet and go all the way up to 15,000 feet. Because there's no terrain in Colorado that is that high, so that we'll make sure that we're covering all terrain that could be possibly above tree line. And then why don't we just select a color here? Let's make that blue, and that is our persistent slab. And we have to add this rule over and save. Okay, so now we see there's some shading starting to come in here. If we turn off slope angle shading, turn down global imagery, we can see that a little bit more clearly, where we're expecting a little bit of that persistent slab problem to exist. And then we can stack layers as well. So if we wanted to add a new avalanche problem, we'll go to DEM shading. We're going to choose 30 to 90. And again, we may just go north all the way over to northwest to cover everything for our storm slab problem. And the elevation will just go from 0 to 15,000. We'll make that one, let's make that one red. Add that rule and save. And so now we see any areas where it's purple, that's where both of those problems exist. We may be a little bit more careful in those zones. And anywhere it's red, that's where the terrain is steep enough to produce a storm slab avalanche. So I think that is a really cool tool that we can use to build our maps. Great, and so now let's make our tour plan. So we have our global imagery turned up so we can select a good route. Okay, I'm going to add a line starting at the parking lot here. And maybe on this day I want to travel up this subtle opening here. I come into here. Right, maybe I'll work my way up this little section. Right. And then I'll just take the road over here, and I can do one of two things. I might decide to descend one of these two lines, or I might continue up the road and choose to get into some of this terrain up here. Okay, so we don't want to expose ourselves to any of this shading up here. So maybe we'll go to this point. Looks like there's some overhanging hazard right here, so we might just start to kind of come into these trees a little bit and then work our way up here. And maybe we'll just call that good. So it's going to ask me to save this map, which I am going to need to do. We're going to call it Area 1, Day 1. Great, and we do want to select URL. Anyone with the maps URL can view this map because we're going to need that for later. So I'll go to save. Great, so that is an ascent route that we might choose to use. And so I'm just going to click on it, and I can see the profile here, and it kind of gives me an idea of how much elevation gain and how steep my route is. It looks like it gets much steeper towards the end of the route. You can also click on this and go to travel time, and you can see kind of a generalized ski tour. This will take us to 0.4 hours, and if you have a paid subscription to Caltopo, then you can select travel plan, and you can actually go to custom, and then you can adjust these numbers if you think you're going to be moving a little bit slower than average. And so these numbers are just arbitrary. It's using the Munter rate, and it's somewhat of an arbitrary number that you can adjust if you think you'll be moving a little bit slow, right? And this will give us a timeline of how long that ascent route would take us, all right? And so that is, half of the day, and now we have to get down. And so we might choose to put our entire route on the same line, or we might choose to just put a couple options into our plan for descent lines. It's always good to have a plan A and a plan B just in case conditions aren't as stable as you were expecting. So I'm going to go up here, go to add, and then select line. Right, and we might just choose to descend through here, and kind of traverse through here, and zoom out a little bit. I see there's some openings in here, and I'm going to be a little bit exposed right here, so I might put a decision point above that before we expose ourselves to that terrain. So there's one descent option, and if I select my ascent line, I can change the color of it. So if I put maybe green for my ascent line, and I can change the style even, which is a really cool feature, and I really like the direction arrows, so it's really clear to me kind of which direction I'm moving. Okay, perfect. And then if I wanted to change the color of this, then I'll just go to edit, and maybe we're going to make that blue. Add some arrows onto it. Okay, perfect. So there's one option. And then another option might be just right in here. So depending on how far we travel in the day, we may just decide to descend one of these two lines. So there's one, and let's add another one. Maybe we descend this line right here. Perfect, so there's a couple options, and maybe we'll make like our plan A, our plan B lines yellow. And okay, and then we'll make this one yellow as well. Style, arrow. Perfect, so we have a couple options here. You know, if my skin track is quite exposed, then I might need to put a plan B skin track as well. I think we've chosen quite a modest skin track line, and we'll probably want to put in some decision points along our route. So depending on how much curriculum we're covering, I might put a decision point right here along our skin track to decide if we want to descend at this point or not. And so we can make that one orange for a decision point and just label it if we want decision point, and then that lettering will show up on our map there. And then we may want another decision point kind of right in here, because we don't know if we want to actually head up this high or not. So let's put this one right here, and I'm just going to say DP for decision point. Great, and there are some options for us. And then another thing that you might choose to do is add a polygon for zones that you should be particularly aware of. And so we may be exposed to this little feature. We may choose to kind of put a polygon around it just to kind of give us some indication that we might be exposed if we travel near this area. And we may choose to put some polygons over here or up here. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete that though, because we already have that shading indicating that we should have a heightened awareness when we are near any of these zones that have any amount of shading on them. And then another good thing to put on, I would say, is the trailhead. So let's make the trailhead purple. I'm just going to say TH. Perfect. And then we have to drag it before we save it. Perfect. And okay. And so now that we have all of these waypoints added, all of these markers added to our line, now when we select it and go to travel plan, and if we select travel plan, now it's breaking these down into legs, so we have an idea of how much elevation gain and mileage we should expect before we have to be aware of making a decision. So it just gives us one more tool to kind of keep our awareness focused throughout the day on whether or not we're accidentally wandering into hazardous areas. So there's that, and that is a pretty great map, I would say. And so there's there's a couple different things we can do from this point. We need to get this to our partners to make sure we have consensus about the plan, and maybe they have something else in mind that they want to go ahead and add kind of their ideas to this map. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. If your partner has an app called Avenza, Avenza, then we can export this as a PDF, and they can just upload it into their Avenza app, and they can actually still see their GPS location when they're in this terrain using a PDF with Avenza. It's a really cool app, and it's actually free. You can have up to 3 maps uploaded into the app at a time. And so the way that we do that is we just go to this printer icon. Perfect. We go to portrait or landscape. Perfect. And we want to make sure that we're capturing all of this terrain that's going to be above us, just to make sure that we understand if we're wandering into hazard, if we end up making any deviations from our plan for the day. So let's go ahead and lower this, and that should be perfect. Okay, and we might also want some slope angle shading on there, just to give us an idea of if we're setting too steep of a skin track, because we want our skin track to be under 15 degrees ideally. Sometimes that's pretty useful, but I'm going to go ahead and take that off for this scenario and generate PDF. And the reason I took it off is because that DEM shading has already kind of highlighted both steep terrain and areas where we're expecting an avalanche problem. Perfect. So now we can either download this and email it to our partners, or I can just share this link with them and they can access the PDF in that way right there. Perfect. So another way that we can export this map, if we have partners who use Gaia, then we may choose to export this map using the GPX file format. So we can select GPX. And as you can see, the DEM shading does not appear with GPX. With JSON it does. However, this JSON file format, I believe, cannot be uploaded into Gaia. However, it may be able to be uploaded into Gaia if you're logged in to Gaia using your web browser. So play around with that, but I recommend GPX, and then when you import this into your Gaia app, you'll just use your own slope angle shading, and you do need to purchase Gaia Premium to be able to access slope angle shading on that specific app. So we'll export that, and we have this file format that we can email over to our friends. Or the last option that we can do is if we go up to this information icon right here, this is the information about our map. We can select Create Shareable Link. And if we want to share this map to friends without giving them the ability to edit our tracks or to add to our tracks, then we would just select Read to create that link. The link that is created is actually the exact same link as what you're seeing up in your web browser. So then if we select Update, then they'll be able to add their own lines and edit their own lines or waypoints or anything on the map, but they won't be able to edit what you've added. And then if you select Write, then anyone that you share that link that's created with, anyone you share that link with, will be able to edit the points and lines that you've already added. They can delete anything, and they can add their own as well. So why don't we just go to the Update link and select OK. And so this is the link that we can share with our friends. And that will give them the ability to add their own thoughts to the map, and it can be more collaborative, which is really important to have the ability to have some consensus before heading into the field with your partners. You can also select that URL, the QR button right there, and it pops this up, and you can open up the QR reader within your Caltopo app, and you can add this map to your map just with that QR reader. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to actually use these exports directly on your phone. So I'll demonstrate with Gaia GPS, with Avenza Maps, and with Caltopo directly. So the first thing, I have sent myself an email with all resources that I will need to complete this demonstration. The first one that I'll show you is how to use Avenza. Avenza is a really great app that allows you to see your GPS point on an actual PDF file while you're in the field. And so I'll show you how to do that. So I've sent this PDF link that's just the URL to the actual PDF that I created earlier on in this video. And so I'll just go ahead and click that URL, and I'll open it up in my downloads. And if I just select it from my downloads, it'll ask me if I want to open it with Avenza Maps, and I can open it right there with Avenza Maps. And I can actually, and this is a line that I drew earlier. I can draw all sorts of items on this map. If I select the stack dots at the bottom right, I can go to draw and measure, and I can add all sorts of lines if I want. And then I can also select those stack dots at the bottom and record my GPS track, and select start tracking while I'm in the field, so I can see where I've come from, where I'm going, while I am in the field. So that's one way. And another way is if I send myself the actual physical PDF file, then I can just download that file, and I can just open it directly from my email by selecting Avenza Apps, and it'll open like this. Now, the Avenza only allows you, the free version only allows you 3 maps at a time, and that's totally okay. Usually only need 1 at a time, so I might have to delete them as I go, but this is what happened when I just selected the actual PDF file. So same result, and you can always use your QR reader directly within the app to be able to scan this. If you have a friend who's showing you the QR code on their map that they've created, you can very easily, as long as you have internet or reception, just scan this code and it'll pull it up on your phone. So those are 2 different ways to use the Avenza app. And the next thing I'll go ahead and show you is ways that you can get tracks into Gaia GPS. So I've sent myself the GPX file. I'm going to go ahead and download that. Cool, I've downloaded that. And now I'm going to go into my Gaia GPS app, and I'm going to go to the plus sign at the top. I'm going to go to import file. I'm going to select that GPX track from my downloads. Great, and when I go to the folder at the bottom right, I should be able to see those lines directly on my map. Right, and as you can see, I have quite a few other lines on my map. So there they are. You know, the color and the waypoint shape does not import, but that is totally okay. Great, and then you keep in mind that before you'll be able to use this feature in the field, the Gaia GPS in the field, you'll have to select the plus sign at the top right, and then go to download map, and you can select the exact area that you'd like to download, and then download it from there. And you won't be able to see your map in the field unless you do that. Great, and so then the last thing I'll go ahead and show you is the Caltopo app. So the first URL here is the URL that I have copied directly from my web browser's URL field on my computer while I was editing the map. So I just copied that and sent it to myself. So now when I select that, it actually opens up directly in my Caltopo app with no extra effort needed. Now keep in mind, this is not editable with your friends. If you're opening it on the exact same account that you created it in, then you can go ahead and add lines all over the map as you like. However, your friends won't be able to collaborate. They'll only be able to see this. You can also adjust the layers just as you are able to on your web browser when you select those stack sheets on the top right. And if you select those 4 dots in the bottom right, you can record your track as you go in the field. Great, so that's one way to be able to share your map with your friends, but like I said, that way is not collaborative. I also showed you how to make a collaborative shareable link on your web browser. And so if you, I've selected the permission to be update, and that way my friends can add lines but not edit mine. And so when I select that, I can open that in Caltopo and I can edit that map. And when I make a change on this map, or if a friend makes a change on this map using the link that I sent them, then I will see that update on my map as long as we're within reception, or as long as we have internet. So that's my preferred way to make a collaborative map, so that we can make sure that we all are on the same page and that there is consensus among the group in regard to where we're going and what the general plan is for the day. Great. So I hope that this was informative, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions.